Hi, I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications and host of StrategyCast. Join me and my guests, innovators, disruptors, and visionaries as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies that help you transform, scale, and grow your brand. Today, I'm joined by Marcus Taylor. Marcus is a marketing guru in emerging tech with a rich background in public policy. He is on the show today to share his insights in how the C-suite, from CEOs to CTOs to CMOs and CROs, can navigate investor pressure, leverage beta testing, and build key partnerships. Plus, Marcus and I talked about optimism and creativity, two elusive qualities that can actually make stress in early-stage startups a thing of the past. And don't forget to check out the most recent issue of the StrategyCast newsletter at StrategyCast.com. Just like this episode, it's full of inspiration and a ton of ideas that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to StrategyCast. I am thrilled to have Marcus Taylor join the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I tell you, I am so excited to chat. You are a tech wizard, and I should rephrase that, a tech marketing wizard, and really pushing out some of the most difficult messages with products today that people don't even know exist. Quantum physics is one of the highlights of your career. Tell us a little bit more about what brought you, well, your background, number one, but also what brought you to the love of true tech marketing.
I would love to. So I'm a fractional marketing leader in emerging tech. I specialize and have been specializing for about 2 years in quantum computers. Before that, I worked pretty extensively with artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and the transition towards edge computing. So I have a little bit of an unconventional background for a marketing leader. I actually got my start in hardcore public policy. I have a bachelor's degree in public policy, master's degree in public policy as well. And I specialized in nuclear weapons policy for a think tank called the Arms Control Association.
Wow.
So I worked on ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, which basically means you can't test nuclear weapons anymore in the atmosphere, underground, or in the ocean. I worked on modernization of the nuclear arms forces in the United States and the other major nuclear powers, as well as implementation of the New START Treaty, which was a bilateral agreement between Russia and the United States.
That is like some way cool stuff. And we don't say 4-letter words on this show. Otherwise, I would have used one right there. So how does that dovetail into marketing? What is it, like all that interest that really turned you public policy marketer?
Yeah, so, I got a little burnt out from working in the public policy world. It was hardcore research, some lobbying on Capitol Hill, and collaborating a lot with the federal government, policymakers, Department of Defense, as well as elected officials and their staff. So a few years into that career, I decided to pivot after grad school and go work for a recruiting agency in Manhattan, of all places. And they specialized in placing executive directors in the nonprofit and policy world. They also happen to have a tech arm, and they asked me to help with that as well. And so I started working as a business development director, working directly with these companies to figure out their needs and fill candidate positions. And in addition, I started taking on some marketing tasks, and that included writing newsletters, a complete website and branding redesign, and putting out some long-form research like white papers and industry analyses. And I fell in love with it and decided it would be a perfect pivot away from public policy, would be moving into another very technical field, or in this case, IT marketing.
Yeah, I love it. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today is how to develop community strategies for emerging tech and products that don't even exist today. Talk about changing habits, creating awareness for something someone doesn't even know they need, want, or should even consider. And your public policy background was something that really helped with that because you were, that's the space that you were playing in for a lot of it, that greenfield space.
Exactly. And so it was a natural transition to tech where there's an expectation of thought leadership and subject matter expertise. It was something I quickly fell in love with. And, these major companies have transitioned from traditional advertising campaigns to this more knowledge-based marketing, which involves things like long-form white papers, research reports, really in-depth technical analyses, and customer case studies. And that was a natural transition. It was something that I understood and I understood really how to appeal to the end user, which is someone who doesn't have a whole lot of time for fluff. They want to make a decision and they want to get to the point right now.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you're Series A or Series B or middle market or late market, when you're going after investment or trying to meet investor demands,
Mhm.
and you're rapidly scaling in order to make that happen and starting an ARR that must grow from there, the pressures are immense.
Exactly.
What is marketing's value at the table? Because let's face facts, there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there today. The
Mhm.
show, our guests, our audience has heard me say this a million times, that believe their product is going to sell itself. It is so good. And I think especially when the perceived competition is less or non-existence, which happens in a lot of blue ocean arenas.
Well, I specifically work in the business to business space. It may be different in business to customer because there is an opportunity to go viral and to see a massive increase in the number of users or customers without a whole lot of marketing. But in the B2B space where you have a savvy consumer, you just can't get away with a quick, narrow sales funnel that doesn't take into account the need for multiple stakeholders to validate this information and validate your suitability as a supplier.
Right.
And, I'd also like to say that it's not just marketing that you do in the early stages. Marketing and communications really are wrapped into one. And communications is a lot more than just appealing to the end user or the potential customer. Communications is about defining the brand, defining the story, and communicating to policymakers, regulators, elected officials, potential customers, investors, members of the media, all of these critical individuals who are responsible for your success, and you have to reach in a very concerted, strategic manner.
I love that. And you're like singing my tune here because I think marketing has a bad name and quite frankly a bad rap
Mhm.
because most brands and non-savvy marketers are going to go right to marketing and they're going to skip the comms piece of it. And I would go as far as to say that the comms piece at this stage is far more important,
Absolutely.
at least early stage, than even the marketing.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I think the marketers take the lead from the communications team in an early and mid stage. Startup, especially pre-product, they
Yeah.
have to be at the forefront of those efforts.
And what is the best way for startups to navigate some of these public or public policy avenues that can really help them pushing a new product out to market?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, my specialty is quantum computing. And it's a very interesting industry in the sense that the government has taken a lead from the beginning. A lot of the initial quantum computing research was completed at the academic or the government level. And in 2018, the federal government passed um, the National Quantum Initiative Act. And this was revolutionary. It directed federal agencies to invest vast sums of money on public-private partnerships and on academic institutions in order to push the United States ahead as a leader in quantum computing, partially for economic reasons and partially for national security because of the implications of quantum computing on encryption. And so, 3 weeks ago. It was actually in DC at a big kickoff event. It was hosted by the Senate Committee on Commerce, and it was designed to look back at the past 6 years of the Quantum Initiative Act and to encourage members of Congress to vote yes on reauthorization. And we were one of 12 companies that were invited to present our technology, which was partially built with grants from the federal government. And that's one of my clients, Resilient Entanglement. And we were invited to present our technology and to show members of Congress and of the executive branch exactly what is being built as a result of these strategic investments in the industry.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that bridge between, qualifying the product need and the investment from the government through public policy and many other avenues to consumer demand, buyer demand, I think is really where a lot of the viability happens here. Obviously, research is very, very important. And an agency like Avocet is going to take existing research that is available, whether it be academic or industry, and then we're going to dovetail that and figure out which new research is needed and ultimately, launch the product into the market. Delve into us, if you will, the effective communication strategies that you've seen with research as a starting point.
Ooh, that's really interesting. So, quantum is one of those areas where academic research and the public sector are really intersected. And I know you're based in Longmont, Colorado. Colorado, I think, is the national leader for this sort of academic public-private partnership. And the reason for that is the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade has been investing vast sums of money to turn Colorado, specifically the Denver to Boulder corridor, into a national leader in quantum computing. And Resilient Entanglement, one of my clients, was recently a recipient of the 2024 Translational Quantum Research Seed Grant. It was actually announced about 3 months ago, partially funded from the state of Colorado, partially funded from the National Science Foundation, who's given out about $50 million in quantum funding in the state of Colorado to become an economic and an academic research hub. And it has been transformational. One, you're bringing in experts from these very diverse fields and having them come together to create innovative products that bridge multiple industries. There are companies that are building traditional quantum hardware and sensing. There are also companies that are working in the medical imaging, pharmaceutical research, energy and utilities industries, and they're applying the knowledge derived from these quantum computing researchers who are hugely diverse array of fields.
Right.
And that is resulting in new product development. It's resulting in us becoming a leader in quantum, and it's also validating the work and the viability of the products that these companies are then commercializing and releasing.
Yeah.
Because they've been validated and they've been approved by some of the world's leading researchers and government regulators. And that gives them a heads up when it's time to enter the private sector.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. And as you were explaining all this, I was going through my mind all the different product categories that we have launched out of MBA programs at DU, Denver University, Colorado University, Colorado State University, solid state battery, tons of bioscience, all of these different things. And they can use, and in a lot of situations, it's the professor, it is the physician that is ultimately seeing that there is a hole in the market and what they can do to fulfill that. So they've got that built-in machine of innovation and systems and processes and programs that are going to even help fund some of that. For those products and those, disruptors and innovators and visionaries who are outside of academia, what advice do you have for them on how they can either partner with academia or partner with someone else to help them gain insights on where to go with the product?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Part of the way is academic partnerships, development projects. I know quite a few PhDs and professors who have actually been brought on board by quantum hardware, quantum sensing companies to solve niche problems for them or specific problems in limited development partnerships. In addition, the government is funding this. The National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, Oak Ridge National Laboratory last year actually won a major lab modernization grid grant from the federal government, $25 million to insert quantum computing into the nation's power grid. And they allowed two private sector companies and a couple of academic institutions to help them with that process. And now one of my clients is working with them on the implementation of that process. They're actually validating their commercialized product as part of this public-private partnership. And so, I think that's the best way to do so. And in quantum computing, it doesn't matter whether you're going to a more business focused conference or an academic one. We tend to have a really interesting mix of researchers, cybersecurity professionals, and, traditional MBAs and business focused individuals. And so I think it's really easy to make those connections and to find those opportunities in this industry versus something that's more generalized and you tend to segment your business leaders from your researchers. That's not something I really see in quantum.
And you mentioned, at our economic development office here in Colorado. I mean, I've seen many of our customers have received their first, large tranches from those offices. So I think that's a way, and they've got so many, not investors, but so many, trusted advisors to help along the way, that's another avenue for people to ultimately get teed up with, other organizations. Do you see the investment community coming in and saying, you know what, this is a really good idea. We're going to invest more than we would early stage, and we're going to connect them to their own web of influencers and advisors to help, or is that much later?
I think so. The quantum community in particular is really segmented. You have quantum hardware manufacturers, which tend to be traditional industry giants, IBM, Google, Oracle to an extent, Microsoft. And there's such a large barrier to entry that you're much less likely to see a lot of startups that are working in the hardware area, less so for quantum sensing. But when it comes to quantum software and cybersecurity, I think there's been a real interest from the investor class and taking advantage of this next revolution. And I think a lot of investors who maybe were not part of AI have a little bit of FOMO. They've already missed out once, and there's this sense that this is going to be the next great revolution in tech. We have to become a part of it, but there's a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge, and there's such a huge learning curve that it can be difficult, especially for some of these PhD and researcher-run companies, to communicate the value of their product in a way that an investor can understand. You can't expect them to spend 3 months, reading background information to understand your pitch.
Yeah. The investor, let alone the buyer of the product, right?
Exactly.
So what advice do you have in these situations? What are the best communication strategies when you've got an emerging tech product and a scientist, a physicist, an engineer at the helm who doesn't have the ability, and I say that with love, to really figure out what the best way is to communicate it?
Yeah, there's a couple of different things. One, how do you reach investors? Before we even look at the communication strategies, I really encourage companies to look at investors who have played in this space before. So if you are looking to sell quantum pharmaceutical research software, you can use a platform like PitchBook or many of the other platforms out there and look at the investments made in the past in these specific sectors. You're going to find a more savvy investor who already has background information. Perhaps they have a research analyst and a technical analyst on their team who already have a background in quantum as well. And they're much more likely to immediately get what you're doing and to feel more confident in making that investment. Even an investor who may have billions at their disposal, if they don't have any past experience with this, maybe they've only worked with SaaS apps or social media or, consumer-focused apps in the past, they're much, much less likely to embrace this as a solid business opportunity because they just don't understand it.
Right.
So the first recommendation is to go after investors who have some sort of background in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, data analytics. In terms of communication strategies, this is really where communications and marketing have a fork in the road. because marketing, you're really going to be focused on decision makers at the end user or the customer. Those are typically going to be your chief tech officer, CISO, your chief information security officer, or someone within their vertical who has a really in-depth technical background. And you're going to have to speak to them as an engineer with a business twist.
Right.
Now, for an investor, that's obviously a little bit different. How can you simplify the content? I think the best way is to appeal to them. One of the quantum cybersecurity companies that I work with, when we talk about cryptographically relevant quantum computers, very complex term, but it essentially means a quantum computer that'll soon be able to break all of our conventional encryption. In the next 4 or 5 years or so, they'll be strong enough where they will be able to look at RSA or a lot of these other public encryption methodologies that we use to safeguard financial services, website authorizations, passwords, and they'll be able to break it in seconds. They're very, very powerful, and they're able to match patterns very quickly. We like to use financial services metaphors for them. So, one that I came up with for a past successful pitch at an $8 million valuation or $8 million investment, I think at a $200 million valuation, was this is equivalent to the introduction of algorithm-based trading in the late 1990s, which revolutionized financial services, and it gave these major players an incomparable technological advantage over the competition.
Yeah.
And, the first time I saw an investor look at that, it was like a light bulb went off in their head. And you have to speak their language.
Oh, yeah. And I think drawing those comparisons are really important because it provides a sense of relatability that does not exist today. It's kind of like the what can we do? What can we be? I want to tell a quick story. One of our CU clients years ago, Doug Campbell of Solid Power Battery, and his whole goal, solid state battery manufacturer, his whole goal from a comm standpoint was to get in front of 20 investors. That was it. That was our strategy, was what do we do to ultimately make sure that these 20 people within very, industrial investors, big organizations are going to be interested in us. So we developed an entire PR campaign, media relations campaign, thought leadership, social media, just to raise the awareness of Doug, the leader behind it. Because at the end of the day, people are investing, yes, in the tech, but they're also investing in who is at the helm.
Yeah.
And we took a very, very unique approach with one of the thought leadership prongs, which was called where Doug was actually bringing forward this concept of entrepreneurial dysfunction. And what happens day to day in a lot of entrepreneurial organizations and what they are doing to turn that upside down and kind of poking fun at a lot of it. This really cut the clutter.
Yeah, it does.
You really cut the clutter, which is half of the battle. Long story short, Doug later, one of our big programs for him was after we were able to get in front of these investors and landed them. And he built the manufacturing facility for the product. We had a big press conference with the governor and, people from some of the largest EV manufacturers in the world to celebrate. And 2 years later, he had an IPO. And 2 years after that, he sold his shares for $200 million. So it all started with his vision. There's no discounting that. It all started in a university setting with some great, great insights on what was missing and what was wrong in the battery market.
Yeah.
And then it took a very, very astute leader, Doug Campbell, to determine what he was going to do to get in front of the right audience at the right time with a very unique message to break the clutter. And all too often, I see a lot of brands just taking the same old approach. What are some of the unique approaches that you've seen very astute CEOs and their comms teams? Maybe you've got, you're right in this area too, to really break the clutter and get what's needed.
Yeah, I think establishing that founder profile is critical for these early stage startups. And you don't have the same communications and PR budget as a traditional company, so you have to get a little creative. And so when I look at establishing the CEO's reputation and establishing them as a subject matter expert, look at a three-pronged approach. The first one is going to be earned media. Now, we all know earned media is king. Paid media is still here. People are still spending vast sums of money on it, but it's not a line item that you can justify as an early stage startup, especially pre-revenue. And so earned media is one of the areas where I actually like to use a lot of AI tools. And this is something that has grown on me over the last 6 months to the last year. I used to work pretty extensively with PR agencies, but they are incredibly expensive and out of reach for a lot of small startups. You can't afford a $20,000 or a $30,000 a month retainer for a PR agency, no matter how many results they're able to secure. And the results are limited outside of some exceptional cases.
Right.
And so I actually use some AI PR tools, some examples out there, Muckrat, Crowley, Propel. There are several other ones. And I think in a lot of ways, they have replaced the traditional PR agency because they're able to aggregate data for all of these journalists. They're able to verify and validate this data so you have correct contact information. They have all of their past published stories in one place where you're quickly able to filter through, understand their perspective, and understand the type of sources that they're looking for. And the best ones have an ability to pitch the journalist through the platform itself while syncing to your company email account.
Mhm.
And, those have been incredible. You still have a relatively low rate of success, but if you're able to dedicate 2 to 3 hours a week on this, I've seen returns on investment within the first month. When
Yeah.
you have a vibrant, personable founder who really does have something unique to add to the conversation, I've had incredible success with those platforms.
And I think one of the key components here and the value of a comms firm or a PR firm is knowing what is and isn't newsworthy. And that is where we have had every single entrepreneur who's come to us and wanted us to push the product out has said, this is the story. And every single time, even with the very, very astute ones, we've said, it isn't the story. What is newsworthy? And then we found that newsworthy angle to create more success out of the shoot instead of a lot of at-bats.
And that's 100% true. When I
Yeah.
say I don't use them, I like to do a lot of the implementation myself because as a
Yeah.
startup, you have to be responsible for doing the legwork. A lot of the times you can't afford to farm that out early on. But when it comes to crafting that messaging strategy and understanding the story, I mean, there's no one better than an actual PR professional who has that background. And a lot of times, as I'm sure you know, you guys will reach out to the journalists. You have the relationships already. That insider knowledge can't be replaced. It really
Yeah.
can't.
I totally agree. So we're talking about earned media.
Mhm.
I would imagine you're going to go to shared next.
Well, social media is something that we still use
Yeah.
extensively, especially in
Yeah.
the business to business space. Despite some issues with the LinkedIn algorithm and the effectiveness, and I think some of the dissatisfaction, LinkedIn still is key for B2B marketing, and it's where founders
Period.
have to have a presence.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree.
Twitter, not so much. I'll be honest with you. I know it's still very important business to customer. I just haven't really found a return on investment. And then the final thing is speaking opportunities, panel presentations, being involved in the industry itself and getting their face up there.
Yeah.
You know, in my recent experience, we are getting a 10, 20, 30 times return on investment for the amount of money that you put into every conference. And that is often pre-product. That's just from development opportunities and partnerships for niche research projects. It's
Yeah.
a way to really increase the visibility of your founder, find new opportunities for collaboration, which is critical in quantum, where hardware companies typically want to collaborate with software companies because there is no conflict of interest, there is no competition. And it's a great way to secure new clients and promote that brand awareness.
It's we at the agency talk a lot about effectiveness, and an EMV, I mean, is a way to measure efficiency, but it doesn't necessarily measure effectiveness, especially very, very early stage, because the cycle can be 2 years
Yeah.
to build the awareness that you need to get to the next tranche or
Mhm.
to launch the product. And then once it's launched, the awareness needed to build the brand in the marketplace is going to be another 2 or 3 or even more years based on the budget that you have and how saturated the market might be and how many minds are we changing, or is this so novel that they're ready to go immediately? How do you have that conversation with the brands that you're working on regarding expectations? Because 9 out of 10 times, they're going to end the initiative before it should be ended. They're going to go to another agency. They're going to learn the same thing. And then all of a sudden, agencies have a bad rap.
Yeah, that is difficult. And a lot of times those expectations are from the top down. They're coming from the investor class who expects a return on investment. And they see their money sitting there and they don't see much tangible progress being made. And so one of the things I've really encouraged clients to do, especially in the quantum space, is to focus on development partnerships. And oftentimes these are established before the actual commercialized product. So for example, at Resilient Entanglement, that client works closely with Eaton, with ComEd, with several other energy and utility providers. They're ultimately just released a quantum energy management system. But for the past several years, they've actually worked with those clients to solve niche problems, some of these really complicated mathematical problems related to efficiency and optimization and power energy distribution and transmission. And what that has done is it's given them revenue, small revenue, not commercialized revenue, but critical revenue that funds their efforts. It has also allowed them to start building out case studies, to build out client list, and to achieve validation before they release their product to market. Now, if you've spent 3-4 years developing the product, you release it to market with a big press release and event, and then you wonder why you don't have any paying customers. And that's something that we're talking about. What if it takes a year to 2 years? Well, what if you start that process a year to 2 years before you release the commercialized product?
Exactly.
That, in my experience, has been the key to keeping investors happy and accelerating that sales funnel process. Because all of a sudden you have validation of a major player, you have case studies, you can ask for referrals, and you're already able to answer a lot of those objections that you're going to see from decision makers.
Well, and beta testing, which is one of the main things that you're talking about here, is all built on the relationships as well. But what advice do you have for our listeners today on how they can develop that relationship and get someone to believe that they should be testing a product, implementing a product for the next 6 months, before a launch? And another part to that question is that 6 months is up. What we have learned is typically you got to go back to the drawing board on many different components before you're ready to launch again. So building that time in for reproduct, engineering some things always happens.
Yeah. So, how can you create those relationships? Public partnerships and academic partnerships are one of the most effective ways to do that. Even the largest companies continue to work with academic researchers and public agencies to answer a lot of these critical problems that they have. And if you're able to be referred, even if informally, you have a much better chance of securing a deal if you're walking into the conversation having been validated by someone that they trust. And then in addition, really being active on the panel and the speaking circuit, not on the business side, but on the technical side and the research side. And that's why it's so important to have a CTO or a chief research officer or a CEO with that research background who can present effectively and intelligently on a problem that companies in the industry are facing. And that is a chance for them to hear you. We typically have companies come up to us after our presentations. This is with a variety of clients and ask us, is there any way that we can partner with you? We've never heard this sort of solution before. We want to figure out how we can implement this into our software, into our processes.
I think it's wonderful advice and very, very important. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see brands experiencing along the way here?
That's a really good question. So, I think the biggest challenges we see maintaining investor optimism. This is something that we've talked about. In a field like quantum, where realistically many companies are still several years off from having a commercialized product, and even then several years off from there from having being in the black, it's very, very difficult to meet those investor demands. They want results. And a lot of times they want media coverage, they want TED Talks, they want op-eds. If we don't have sales, then I want to see our name out there. And that can be a struggle for companies that are developing products that have major competitors, or there are patent intellectual property issues, or they're not quite ready to commercialize, and they'll worry that someone else will step in, pour hundreds of millions of dollars into the development and overtake the progress that they've painstakingly made.
Right.
So, first off, I think a knowledgeable founder is the key. This is something that you can't really fix after the fact. How is the board of directors set up? How are the decision-making processes set up? How are the investors vetted and validated before you take their money and sign that contract? That's something that I think not enough people talk about, but it's critical to the success of the company. Because if you have an investor that is demanding artificial progress and they have the internal controls to pull those levers and be able to force progress even if you're not ready, then there's not a whole lot that the business team or the technical team can do in order to undo that damage.
Yeah.
I think founders really need to be careful about vetting investors before they're brought on board and vetting their power.
That could be a totally separate show, by the way, because we've learned, our clients have learned, in the last 5 years, we've had, I don't know, 8 different investor/IPOs with our clients. And I would say 3 of them are going really well. Because it was the wrong investor. And one thing, as you were saying this, I wrote down the word early. And there's so much pressure from the investors that everything is happening. The go-to-market strategy is happening way too early because of that pressure. And I can't tell you the number of times we've been at market and the product is not ready, but the company has no choice. What advice do you have for the CEO, CTO, CMO, CRO in these situations on how to push back?
You have to meet them with language that they understand. And oftentimes you have to see if you can bring on board somebody that they trust from a business perspective. And, a lot of investors really don't have a trust. They have a trust in their management team, but when it comes to the overall strategy and direction, they believe that they are the end all be all voice of reason. So, if you have minority investors, if you have board of director members who are intelligent, who understand the industry, who can articulate the case for waiting, those are your best options, because that's a peer speaking to them rather than an employee. And, I've been involved in those conversations where I've had to pitch this to an investor and explain the risk of going to market too early. And the most successful ones are when we had a member of the board of directors, member of the board of advisors, who has decided to be the champion on our case and either take the lead on it or, sit beside us as we advocate our case.
Yeah. The consultation and feedback that they provide in those situations is immeasurable when it comes to making the right decision.
And that's why they're there.
Right.
For their expertise and their judgment.
Yeah.
And then, we talked about beta testing. We talked about those partnership opportunities. That is a way to head off investor concerns before they force your hand.
Yeah.
If you have some revenue coming in, if you have some successes, that's going to make it much more likely that you can advocate and win your case.
Yeah.
In addition, I've actually brought investors with me to meet with partners. If there really are concerns about the viability of the product or the ability to pitch to customers, and you have a successful beta partnership, bring the investor to the next in-person meeting. Let them talk to the client. Let them hear about your successes firsthand. Your clients are your greatest resource, and that's not only the case when it comes to future clients, it's also the case when it comes to your investors.
And it seems so simple, Marcus, but what a great idea to be able, it truly, to lessen the fear, the anxiety, the anger that an investor might have in that situation. I think that goes a long way. We're almost at the end of our show here today. Any last insights for our audience today before we have to part ways?
Early stage startups are stressful. They're uncertain, but they're exciting. You're doing something new, you're bringing a new product to market, and you're changing the world one small step at a time. So I think it's important to maintain that optimism and that excitement. You're going to face challenges, you're going to face setbacks, but you're also undergoing the most exciting, exhilarating experience of your life.
Yeah.
And so have fun, enjoy the process. You'll be more effective, and you'll be a more effective leader. You'll be a more effective specialist at what you do, and you're more likely to improve the odds of success when you have fun and you embrace creativity. Because a lot of these strategies that I've used are just a result of embracing creativity in a moment of stress and being overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's great. And it takes that outside perspective to really help the visionary see what can be. So we
Exactly.
appreciate your insights so much today, Marcus. What
Thank
is the best
you.
way for our audience to get in contact with you?
Yeah, they can reach me through my agency website. It's trilogygrowthpartners.com
That's
or
great.
LinkedIn.
And oh, yeah, you're prolific on LinkedIn, and that's how we met. So thank you for that. And if you want to get a hold of me, please email me at Lori@StrategyCast.com. And don't forget to sign up for the StrategyCast newsletter while you're there as well. Thank you, Marcus, so much for your
Thank you
appearance
so
on
much.
StrategyCast.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Lori. Have a great day.
Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.